are reflected in proposed order number 8734. I believe that the decision was to allow the company to withdraw its application without prejudice, and that I could add that the vote was 3-1 on that decision. I left that off in this order, but I believe that other than that suggested change that I'm now looking at, I believe that this reflects the decision that the commissioners made at the last meeting regarding the pending application.
Is there, Mr. Bonor, any comment with respect to this matter?
No comment.
Is there anyone from the public or any other party that's here to address this matter? Commissioner Conaway, do you have any response or comment with respect to the observation of Ms. Donahue with respect to the vote? Or would you like to have the vote?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So it's moved?
Yes.
No, it has not been moved
Oh,
yet. Unless
sorry.
Commissioner Gray is doing
Do
it.
you have any questions?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chair. Chair, I move that the commission adopt order number 8734 as submitted.
Is there a second from
I
Ms.
second
Conaway?
that. I second that.
Okay, we have the same issue here, Patty, as we did in the last.
But he was here.
I understand he was here, but he was a non-voting commissioner at the time he was here. Why don't we, just to make sure that it's perfectly, we're uncharted water here. Let's have Mr. Conaway, if you'd be kind enough to make a second.
Second the motion.
And is there any discussion on the motion to approve order 8734? Hearing none, I assume we will have the three commissioners who are present vote on this matter. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed or any abstentions? I guess the motion would pass unanimously with two non-voting commissioners due to the fact they did not hear this matter.
Just so we can clarify on the consent agenda, should the vote for approval be 3-0 on that one also?
Well, that's a good point perhaps, but I think that with the consent agenda, it's a matter of what a commissioner might want pulled off, not necessarily so I think that we're okay
I think
on
you're
that.
good on the consent agenda.
If someone wants to appeal it, we'll address it then.
Okay.
You're warm in my heart.
So, okay, the next matter will be number 2 on the calendar, the matter of the application of Delaware Power and Light Company for approval of modifications to its natural gas cost rates. We're going to be considering proposed order number 8739 under the guidance of Mr. Geddes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and new members of the Commission. This is an application made by Delmarva with regard to its GCR, requesting a waiver of certain tariff provision with regard to its over-collection. As explained in the last whereas clause on page 2, the reasons for the requested waiver, the fact that if a decrease was put in, that it wouldn't be as efficient as carrying the over-collection forward and addressing it in the next GCR filing. Ms. Scott's here on behalf of the company. She filed the letter application, and she may be able to fill in some more details as to the constraints on the company with regard to making this waiver. As a result of this is not the first time we've been in this situation where weather has played, shall we say, a different role than somebody anticipated with regard to gas sales. They're very hard to predict, and weather obviously has a rather significant impact. And for those of you who were fortunate enough to spend some of the winter here in Wilmington, you know that the weather, shall we say, was chilly. So with that, staff supports this form of order, and perhaps Ms. Scott can add some more details to it.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Chairman Winslow and members of the Commission. As indicated in the application, Delmarva's tariff states that in the event of an over-collection greater than 4.5%, we are required to submit an application to change on an interim basis the gas cost rate. Our over-recovery, as Mr. Geddes indicated, was largely due to the fact that we continued to have lower than normal temperatures in March, and we also continued to have a decreasing price for gas. So those two combined ended up putting us over this 4.5% threshold. And also indicated in our application we do not believe it's in the best interest of the customers to now attempt to present an application to request that a decrease be put in place, because the earliest we likely would be able to do this, and that's assuming that we get a waiver from the notice requirements, the earliest would be after the June bills go out. And since the GCR period essentially ends October 31st, it's not going to give us sufficient amount of time to recover or for customers to be made whole with respect to this. So we essentially will catch up with this in the next GCR period. We had a waiver request before the commission back in 2012. That was actually an opposite situation where we actually had an under recovery, and that waiver request had also been granted by this commission.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Bonar? Or Ms. Iori?
I'm his mouthpiece today.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Does that mean that Mr. Bonar is not going to speak today?
You never know. It may surprise you.
The public advocate agrees with the proposed waiver and supports the firm of order. Thank you.
And just so all the commissioners will know, what dollar sign are we looking at here in terms of a consumer every month? It's not a very substantial figure, correct?
It is not a very substantial figure. I don't have the exact amount, but it is not a very substantial figure.
Okay.
And I just point that the consumer is still protected under the
Right.
tariff provision with regard to how it's calculated.
Is anybody here from the public to speak on this matter? Any commissioner have any question of Mr. Geddes or Ms. Scott?
Yes, Chair. I have a curious question. Is this a rate that gets reviewed annually?
Yes.
Okay.
This is a rate we apply every year at the end of August. We make an application. And it is rates then go in effect for the period subject to review. And in fact, this GCR, we have a settlement in place, but it has not yet been submitted to the commission for approval. It has been before the hearing examiner for a hearing.
It just seems like, as an observation, that the time period of an annual, it always puts you in a crunch that you can't really catch up with it in a year's time. So that's just a point of observation.
We could go on and on about the tariff and how it originally was calculated, but I'll save that for another time. Or how it was
I'm glad to see that Mr.
derived.
Bonar is presenting a good mentor to follow on it. It's good. Any questions from the commissioners with respect to the proposed order? Do we have perhaps a motion from the commissioner with respect to the proposed order?
Will we adopt order number 8739 as presented?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any discussion with respect to the motion to approve proposed order 8739? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Scott. The next matter is in the matter of the Commission's investigation into whether Ernest P. Timmons or E.A. Timmons Mobile Homes Incorporated is unlawfully operating as a public utility. Is Mr. Timmons or his representative present for this matter? And I guess Ms. Donahue?
Yes, Chair and Commissioners, you have before you proposed order number 8740. This is again based on your deliberations from the last meeting. Staff had presented to you a report regarding the status of the investigation and whether or not there had been an answer filed regarding your opening order. There was no answer filed, and staff had recommended that you appoint a hearing examiner but delay the proceedings on this matter so that there could be a time period in which, if possible, Tidewater, which has filed an intervention, would be able to possibly work with Mr. Timmons and the company in order to perhaps come up with a solution that would be acceptable to this situation and this particular docket. I have drafted this proposed order number 8740 based on your deliberations. It does appoint Mr. Campbell Hay as the hearing examiner. It does have the time delay up to June 5th, in which no proceedings should move forward until that date. And then it also adds to the order that Campbell Hay will be able to act on any petitions for intervention, including the one that was subsequently filed, but not in time to be on the last meeting agenda, if that makes sense. So there is a pending petition for intervention that he would be allowed to rule on based on this particular order. And if you have any questions or any modifications, I'm happy to make those.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. Ms. Iori,
The public advocate supports the form of order. Thank you.
is there anyone here from the public to address this proposed order? There appears to be none. Any commissioner have any questions of Ms. Donahue? So I guess this will be another 3-0 matter. May we have a motion?
Chair, I move that the commission adopt order number 8740 as submitted.
And I'll second that motion.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to approve proposed order 8740? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any in opposition? And any abstentions? The motion passes 3-0. The next matter is the hearing schedule. And we have, the first matter is in the matter of the investigation and adoption of rules to govern payphone services within the state of Delaware. And we're going to be considering the proposed order number 8741, which would delete the rules. And I believe we have, on this, I believe we have Mr. Geddes.
Are we in reg docket 12?
Yes, you are, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this case is being reopened by Commission Order 8705 dated February 5, 2015 to consider revising the current payphone rules. I believe in the old days we called this COCOT. And if you went to any 7-Eleven or whatever, you'd see one of these machines. I don't believe they still exist except in the Delaware correctional facilities where inmates use these facilities to make calls.
I think there's one in the Delaware History Museum.
I haven't been there recently, but thank you for that postscript and my comment. Pursuant to PSC Order 8705, notice was of the proposed revision to the Commission's payphone rules was published in the News Journal paper dated February 12, 2015, and in the Delaware State News February 13, 2015, and March 1st edition of the Delaware Register of Regulations. A public hearing was also held on April 15, 2015 at the Commission's offices. No member of the public attended that public hearing. Notice of today's evidentiary hearing was published in the News Journal and the Delaware State News on April 24, 2015. The Commission has one witness, and we do have a series of exhibits I'd like to pass out at the present time.
Only one of each.
Apologize. Exhibit list and the exhibits that we would request be entered into the record at the time Ms. McDowell is sworn and testifies.
These are the same exhibits you mentioned orally in your
Yes.
presentation.
So I would request, with the Commission's permission, that Ms. McDowell be called to the stand and sworn.
The exhibits offered are admitted, and please swear Ms. McDowell.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Ms. McDowell, would you state your full name and business address for the record?
Yes, it's Connie S. McDowell, and I work at 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Dover, Delaware.
And in connection with your employment with the Commission, have you had a chance to review the rules with regard to payphone, and have you also had an opportunity to file a staff report with the Commission?
Yes, I did.
Could you briefly describe on the record the staff report and your conclusions that you've made in that report?
Yes. Currently, I am going through all of the telecommunication
regulations to update them since the commission now has very limited jurisdiction over telecommunication services. In this proceeding, I'm trying to delete the payphone rules. We did receive one comment from, and the company's name is Network Communications International Corporation, and they requested that we create inmate payphone rules. And as I wrote back to them and stated that the jurisdiction of the inmate facilities are under the Department of Technologies and Information. They're the ones who do all the state contract for state-owned facilities. And in Delaware, all inmate facilities are state-owned. We had our public comment session, and no one participated in that proceeding. So I continue to recommend to the commission that we delete the payphone rules. We now have cell phones, and finding any payphone in Delaware is very limited. We do have them at the inmate facilities. We do have them at the rest area, and those are governed by the Department of Transportation. And I guess there are a few odds and ends, but basically we get no complaints on payphones, and I consider them obsolete.
Is there anything else you believe should be brought to the attention of the commission before they consider proposed order 8741?
These are the rules that will be published in the July 1st Delaware Registrar, and they will become final upon your approval on July the 11th.
And as a result of this order, there will be no further regulation of these payphones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I have nothing further for this witness. She's available for any questions that the commission may have or any party may have with regard to her testimony.
Ms. Iori?
No questions.
Any commissioner have a question of Ms. McDowell? It's an opportunity to ask a question because this is a historic moment. Maybe never before have I heard of regulation going away. Body of regulation. So if there's any newspaper person, that's really the big story here today.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have
Chairman, Commissioner Gray.
So it's not that, since I'm from the period when payphones were prominent, that I'm asking these questions, but when I read through most of the information provided to me with regard to this topic, it appeared as though a certificate of public convenience was, required for someone who wanted to operate a payphone service in the state. Things like a dial tone had to show up. You had to be able to reach 911. They couldn't take your money without giving you a phone call. And in today's technology world, I'm a little bit wondering who is then becoming the enforcement arm if someone shows up with their digital capabilities and starts replicating what they describe to be payphone service around the state. Where is the enforcement coming from?
The commission does not have any jurisdiction over any of the telecommunication services except to certificate the company coming in to offer like long distance or local exchange. There is nothing now in our Delaware code that has us have jurisdiction over payphones.
Will we continue to certificate persons who come in? So the question still is on the table. Who then becomes the enforcement or the regulatory body?
For the services of like 911, that is home plan safety, they require and they actually collect monies from all the telecommunication providers. So they would be the enforcement of whether it will reach 911.
I guess the scenario that I painted for you again, technology is pervasive. Someone can show up and replicate the offering and not provide services in return for a fee. So who intervenes?
Who would intervene?
Yeah. Who would step up and intervene and have jurisdiction or enforcement power to shut down such a...
I do not know.
Sorry?
I do not know.
If these rules were left in place, or some portion thereof, would this commission then have some jurisdiction to intervene in that scenario?
Would they? Yes. You don't think so?
Commissioner, I think that's a legal question, and it's probably subject to some varied interpretations. I think staff's position is that the commission, through various regulations, no longer has authority over this particular service, and that trumps all other possible scenarios, since specifically there are no regulations that can be enforced by the commission. Now, if this hypothetical did come about and it was an abuse, then the legislature could come forward and say, well, the commission should be authorized to do this. But at the present time, the conflict between the federal regulations and state regulations, I don't think the commission, without some specific authorization, would have any authority in your scenario, in your hypothetical scenario.
Okay. Thank you.
Effectively, a year ago, the legislature took our jurisdiction from us, correct?
3 years ago.
I mean, so this is getting rid of this would seem to be a positive. Any further questions of Ms. McDowell? Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to be heard on this matter? Seeing none, does any commissioner have any motion with respect to this proposed order 8741?
I should move to accept and approve order number 8741.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve order number 8741? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion
I'll abstain.
abstention from Commissioner Gray. The motion passes almost unanimously. Ms. McDowell, thank you very much for your hard work on this matter, and that is much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Geddes. I think that's the end of the calendar. No, it's not the end of the calendar.
I'm happy to leave now.
We do have another matter of some interest to all of us, a very important matter that we'd like to discuss today, and that's in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company, Exelon Corporation, Pepco, et cetera, for the approvals under the provisions of our Delaware Code for the merger. And I believe we'll be starting with, first of all, invite all the parties to the table. And secondly, I will welcome Mr. Geddes to give us some guidance on where the parties stand and what the commission has got to do today. And also, we have to remember that we got our hearing examiner, Mr. Lawrence, present, who will be running the procedural show for us, and he's got some preliminary things he's got to do. So we'll start by placing Mr. Lawrence in charge of this matter.
Good afternoon. Mark Lawrence, Senior Hearing Examiner. I'm the hearing examiner who was assigned by the Commission to process this case, docket number 14-193. This is the proposed merger involving Exelon Corporation, PH Holdings, Inc., and Delmarva Power and Light Company. There was an evidentiary hearing held on April 7, 2015. At that time, the parties agreed to